Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Kneel. The command wasn't shouted, but it cracked through the silent, cavernous expanse of the Grand Marshal's private quarters like the lash of a whip. Merrick didn't move. He stood in the center of the obsidian floor, his wrists bound in magnetic cuffs that hummed with a low, oppressive frequency, blood trickling from a fresh cut above his eyebrow. It tasted of copper and defiance. He stared up at the man sitting on the edge of the sprawling mahogany desk, a man who looked less like a soldier and more like a deity carved from ice and violence. Valerian Cross, the Iron Wolf of the sector for hegemony. The man who had burned Merrick's home district to ash, and the only man in this godforsaken city who possessed the codes to the bomb currently ticking inside Merrick's chest. I said, kneel, Valerian repeated, his voice dropping an octave, rough with a fatigue that belied his lethal posture. He took a sip of amber liquor from a crystal tumbler, his cybernetic left eye whirring faintly as it zoomed in on Merrick's trembling hands. Go to hell, Valerian. Merrick spat, the words wet with blood. Valerian didn't get angry. He didn't strike him. He simply set the glass down with a terrifying gentleness, stood up, and closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He towered over Merrick, a wall of black military tacked weave and raw muscle. With a hand encased in a glove of black leather, he reached out and gripped Merrick's chin, forcing his head up. I am already there, little engineer, Valerian whispered, his thumb brushing the bruise blooming on Merrick's cheekbone. And unfortunately for you, I'm the only demon here who wants to keep you alive. The relationship between the Grand Marshal and the prisoner was a paradox that baffled the entire hegemony. To the outside world, Merrick was a spoil of war, a brilliant mechanic plucked from the ruins of the resistance because his mind was the only one capable of maintaining the experimental singularity drive that powered the city's defense grid. He was a slave in all but name, tethered to the hegemony by the subdermal explosive implanted near his heart. But inside these walls, the dynamic shifted like sand in a storm. Valerian Cross was not whole. Half his body was a construct of forbidden pre-war technology, a chaotic mess of wiring and alloy that gave him godlike strength but subjected him to agonizing phantom pains that no doctor dared to treat. No doctor except Merrick. It was a transaction of survival. Merrick kept Valerian's mechanical body from tearing itself apart. Valerian kept Merrick from the executioner's block. The silence that followed Valerian's statement was heavy, filled with the hum of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the neon rain of the cyberpunk metropolis fell in sheets. Inside, the air crackled with unresolved tension. You call this keeping me alive? Merrick jerked his chin out of Valerian's grip, stepping back. The magnetic cuffs whined. Parading me in front of the council? Letting High Counselor Draven inspect me like I'm a piece of cattle? I saw the way he looked at me, Valerian. He knows. Valerian turned away, walking to the window. His silhouette was sharp against the neon purple and blue of the skyline. Draven suspects that I have softened. He believes my reliance on your engineering skills has become a weakness. He wanted to test my resolve by suggesting you hand me over to his labs for dissection. Merrick's voice rose, cracking slightly. And you didn't say no immediately. You hesitated. Valerian's shoulders stiffened. The leather of his coat creaked. I calculated. You calculated? Merrick let out a dark, incredulous laugh. My life hangs in the balance, and you're running algorithms? Valerian spun around, his organic eye, a piercing, storm gray, blazing with sudden ferocity. I calculated the exact amount of seconds it would take to slaughter every guard in that room if Draven touched you. The answer was 12. But doing so would have started a civil war that would burn this sector to the ground. I hesitated, Merrick, because I was restraining myself from tearing his throat out with my teeth. The confession hung in the air, raw and shocking. Merrick stared at him, his breath hitching. This was the complexity of Valerian Cross, a man of absolute brutality who protected what was his with the possessive instinct of a feral beast. Come here, Valerian said, his tone softer now, lacking the imperious edge of the commander. He sat on a velvet armchair, unbuttoning the collar of his uniform to reveal the scarred, metallic plating of his collarbone. The port is overheating. It hurts. The shift from warlord to patient was jarring, yet familiar. This was their ritual. The hate, the fear, the politics, it all dissolved when the tools came out. Merrick hesitated, his heart hammering against the metal casing in his chest. He shouldn't. He should let the man suffer. He should let the overheating servos burn Valerian from the inside out. It would be justice for the resistance. It would be freedom. But then he looked at Valerian's face, the tight lines of pain around his eyes, the slight tremor in his human hand. Merrick sighed, a sound of defeat and resignation. He walked over to the workbench in the corner, grabbed his diagnostic kit, and approached the chair. Unlock the cuffs. I can't work like this. Valerian tapped a sequence on his wrist gauntlet. The magnetic lock disengaged with a hiss, and the cuffs fell to the floor with a heavy clang. Merrick rubbed his raw wrists, glaring at the man before him. Shirt off, Merrick commanded. Valerian smirked, a ghost of an expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared. So demanding. Shut up. As Valerian stripped off his heavy coat and the tactical shirt beneath, the extent of his damage was revealed. His torso was a tapestry of scars and metal. The left side of his chest was replaced by a sleek, black carbon fiber chassis that glowed with a faint red light. It was beautiful in a grotesque way, a masterpiece of violence. Merrick knelt between Valerian's spread legs, his tools clicking softly. The proximity was intoxicating. He could smell the scent of ozone, expensive whiskey, and old leather that clung to the marshal. He placed his hand on the metal plating, feeling the dangerous heat radiating from the core. You've been pushing the output limits again, Merrick murmured, his voice professional now, detached. He twisted a small screwdriver into an access port. If you keep redlining your adrenaline in combat, the cooling venting won't keep up. You'll cook your remaining organic organs. I had to put down an insurrection in District 9, Valerian grunted, wincing as Merrick adjusted a sensitive wire. They had EMP rounds. And you decided to tank them? Merrick scoffed, his fingers moving with practiced dexterity. You have an army, Val. Use them. They aren't as efficient as I am. Arrogant bastard. Careful, engineer. Your hands are inside my chest. Merrick looked up, his eyes locking with Valerian's. They were inches apart. The heat was palpable, and not just from the machinery. For months, they had danced around this line, a line drawn in blood and ideology. Enemies. Captor and captive. But in the quiet hours of the night, when the pain stripped Valerian of his armor and the isolation stripped Merrick of his anger, something else bloomed in the dark. Why didn't you let Draven take me? Merrick asked, his voice barely a whisper. He offered you the new Model X battalion. That's enough firepower to overthrow the Emperor. You could have had everything you ever wanted. Valerian reached out, his metal fingers cold against the warm skin of Merrick's neck. He traced the pulse beating there. I realized, Valerian said slowly, that a kingdom of ash is worthless if I have to rule it alone. Merrick's breath caught. I'm just a mechanic, Val. You are the only thing in this world that is real, Valerian corrected him. His gaze dropped to Merrick's lips, then back up to his eyes. Fix me, Merrick. Make the pain stop. The pain is structural, Merrick said, his voice trembling. I can't fix what the war did to you. Not that pain, Valerian murmured. He leaned down, closing the gap. It wasn't a forceful kiss, but it was heavy with desperation. It tasted of whiskey and despair. Merrick froze for a heartbeat, his mind screaming at him to pull away, to grab a scalpel and end the tyrant right now. But his body betrayed him. His hands, still slick with cooling fluid, slid up Valerian's bare shoulders, gripping the scarred skin. He kissed back, pouring all his frustration, his fear, and his confused longing into the contact. Valerian groaned low in his throat, his arm tightening around Merrick's waist, dragging him closer until Merrick was practically in his lap. The power dynamic shifted. The marshal was no longer the conqueror, but a starving man feasting. When they broke apart, breathless, Merrick rested his forehead against Valerian's metallic chest. The red light of the core pulsed in time with his own racing heart. This changes nothing, Merrick whispered, though he knew it was a lie. I still hate you. Good. Valerian rasped, burying his face in Merrick's hair. Hate is passion. I can work with passion. Indifference is what kills. The alarm shattered the moment. Red emergency lights began to strobe, bathing the room in a bloody hue. A synthesized voice blared from the intercom. Asterisk, security breach. Level 1. Unauthorized access in the detention block. Subject, Merrick Thorne. Asterisk. Merrick pulled back, eyes wide. What? I'm right here. Valerian's face hardened instantly, the lover vanishing behind the mask of the warlord. He stood up, buttoning his shirt with military precision, ignoring the tools still scattered on the floor. He tapped his comms unit. Report. Asterisk, sir. High Counselor Draven's personal guard has breached the perimeter. They have a warrant for the prisoner. They claim you are compromising hegemony security by harboring a saboteur. They are at the door. Asterisk. Valerian looked at Merrick. The gaze was unreadable. Draven didn't wait for my answer. He decided to force my hand. The heavy blast doors of the private quarters shuddered as an explosion rocked the corridor outside. They were coming. Merrick scrambled backward, fear clutching his throat. Valerian, if they take me. They won't. Valerian walked over to a hidden panel in the wall. He punched in a code, and the panel slid open to reveal a cache of heavy weaponry. He grabbed a kinetic pulse rifle and a bandolier of plasma grenades. Draven has a full squad, Merrick said, panic rising. You can't fight them all. Not in your condition. Your cooling vents haven't reset. Valerian turned to him. He looked terrifying, a mixture of man and machine ready for war. He tossed a small, heavy object to Merrick. Merrick caught it. It was a remote detonator. What is this? Merrick asked. The control for your subdermal explosive, Valerian said calm, racking the slide of his rifle. I'm deactivating the remote link to the central server. You are now off the grid. If you press that button, the bomb deactivates harmlessly. You are free. Merrick stared at the device. It was his freedom. It was everything he had wanted for 2 years. Why? Because, Valerian said, walking toward the blast doors as sparks began to fly from the hinges where cutting lasers were working through the metal. I told you. I calculated. Valerian, take the service elevator behind the bookshelf. It leads to the Undercity. With your skills, you'll disappear in a day. What about you? Merrick screamed, standing up. They'll execute you for treason. The blast doors groaned, metal shrieking against metal. Valerian looked back over his shoulder. A sad, crooked smile touched his lips, the first genuine smile Merrick had ever seen on him. I am the Iron Wolf. Let them try. No. Merrick didn't run to the elevator. He ran to the workbench. His hands flew across the holographic interface of the diagnostic terminal he had been using on Valerian. Merrick, go. Valerian roared as the doors blew inward with a concussive blast. Smoke filled the room. Armored troopers poured in, laser sights sweeping the gloom. Target acquired, a trooper shouted. Valerian opened fire. The sound was deafening. Blue pulses of kinetic energy tore through the air, crumpling the lead troopers like paper. But there were too many. Valerian took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, his human shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back, but kept firing. Merrick wasn't leaving. He was typing furiously. Asterisk system override. Limiters disengaged. Berserker protocol, active, asterisk. He slammed his hand on the enter key. Across the room, Valerian's body suddenly arched. The red light in his chest flared into a blinding white. A roar ripped from his throat, not a human sound, but the sound of a reactor going critical. The limiters Merrick had so carefully maintained, the safety protocols that kept Valerian from using his full, devastating power, were gone. Merrick had just turned the safety off. Valerian moved. He was a blur. He dropped the rifle and engaged the mag blades in his mechanical arm. He moved faster than the eye could follow, a whirlwind of steel and death. The troopers didn't stand a chance. It wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter. In 30 seconds, the room was silent, save for the crackle of burning electronics and the heavy, ragged breathing of the Grand Marshal. Valerian stood amidst the wreckage, blood dripping from his blades. He turned slowly to face Merrick. His eyes were glowing with dangerous intensity, his system redlining. He was overheating. Badly. Smoke curled from his joints. Merrick walked toward him, stepping over the debris. He wasn't afraid. You idiot, Merrick whispered, tears stinging his eyes. You were going to die for me. Valerian fell to his knees, his system seizing up from the thermal overload. Merrick caught him, sinking to the floor with the heavy weight of the cyborg soldier in his arms. You stayed, Valerian wheezed, his skin burning hot to the touch. I gave you freedom. You gave me a detonator, Merrick said, his hands already working to pop the emergency release latches on Valerian's chest plate to vent the heat. You didn't give me a choice. I don't want a freedom that cost your life. Valerian looked up, his vision flickering. Why? Merrick deactivated the bomb remote and tossed it aside. He placed his cool hands on Valerian's feverish face. Because you're a broken, violent, arrogant catastrophe of a man, Merrick said softly, leaning his forehead against Valerian's. And I'm the only mechanic good enough to keep you running. You belong to me now, Valerian. I fixed you. I own you. A laugh, wet and pained, bubbled up from Valerian's chest. He leaned into Merrick's touch, closing his eyes as the emergency vents hissed, releasing clouds of steam around them, wrapping them in a white fog. Terms accepted, Valerian whispered, consciousness fading as his systems went into emergency reboot. Merrick held him tight in the ruin of the office, surrounded by bodies and betrayal, listening to the sirens wailing in the distance. The war was outside, and they were enemies of the state. But as he felt the steady, mechanical thrum of the heart he had saved, Merrick knew one thing for certain. The wolf hadn't just tamed the engineer. The engineer had dismantled the wolf and rebuilt him into something entirely his own. And that is how the mechanic captured the warlord's heart, literally and figuratively. If you enjoyed seeing the tables turn and Merrick finally taking control of his captor, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you save the monster who held you captive, or would you have taken the detonator and run? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Valerian, tall, muscular, military commander, wearing torn black tactical uniform. Half of chest is glowing mechanical sci-fi cybernetics, scarred skin, gray hair, fierce protective expression, kneeling on floor, steam rising from body, man 2. Merrick, smaller frame, messy dark hair, wearing oil-stained white shirt and engineer trousers, holding man 1, gentle butt. Possessive expression, hands on man 1's face. Background is destroyed futuristic office, shattered glass, unconscious armored soldiers on floor, red emergency lighting, smoke, dramatic atmosphere, cinematic composition, intricate details, glowing neon city outside broken window.